Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie Wist. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. So, hello, Susan Stern. What are the best reasons to watch your documentary Bad Attitude: The Art of Spain Rodriguez?
The best reason to watch Bad Attitude is to have a good time. It really rocks. I mean, what else do you need? You know, there's dirty pictures, including some of myself. I was younger then. Drawn by Spain, drawn by one of the masters of underground comics. There's an incredible soundtrack, original score by B. Quincy Griffin, but Santana, Mingus, all sorts of 50s music. You know, it just kind of has it all. It's a very, if I say so myself, it's a moving family story about a family of artists, about one of the pioneers of underground comics. And if you don't know about underground comics, we wouldn't have graphic novels, and we probably wouldn't have the culture that loves comic book movies without underground comics paving the way in the 1960s. So it tells that story of underground comics. In fact, it tells kind of a history of comics in America. A lot of people don't know comics are an American art form. Spain, Rodriguez, my late husband, who's featured in the movie, he was born in 1940. Superman was born in 38 or 39. All the superheroes were born at the same time. So it gives you this sweep of comic book history, tells you how we got to where we are today, where so many of our films are based on comics. But it's also a really deep family story.
So tell us how you met Spain Rodriguez, and how did you two change each other respectively?
Well, I was a young journalist. I was a young feminist, as I describe in the film. I edited a feminist magazine. I lived in a separatist household. We did those things in the 70s. We had a little wheel on the wall which said, you know, who cleaned the bathroom on Tuesdays, and it also said which days there could be male energy in the house. And I was going with a boyfriend who was a cartoonist, and I got a job for an arts magazine to write an article about underground comics. This was in the 1970s. And the boyfriend said, okay, we're going to go to the party. There were great comics parties in San Francisco in the 1970s. And he took me to the party and pointed out, okay, these are the main players. And so I set up an interview. I went to interview Spain. He hit on me, but I was with this other guy, you know, so Spain and I flirted for about 2 years at comic book parties. And then he broke up with his girlfriend. I broke up with my boyfriend, and we got together, and we were together for 33 years. How did we change each other? That's a really good question. As I say in the film, Spain never became a feminist, and the film talks about his struggles with the feminist movement. He wasn't a pig, you know, but he depicted women in a very sexual way, and that's very controversial, and that's something we explore in the film. It probably changed him the most we had a child together who is a wonderful woman now, an animator and an arts educator, and she's in the film. And I think that's what changed him. I think having a child and having a daughter arguably really changed him. How did he change me? I mean, you could probably relate to this. I always felt that we said, when I was a journalist, and I was a print journalist for a long time, we said journalists had ink in their veins. And it was the same thing with cartoonists. It was like journalists were to literature as comics was to art. We were some sort of bastard medium that was never really taken seriously. And yet we took it very seriously. And so we were very alike in that respect. I think for me, you know, Spain was older than me. Spain was in a lot of ways a mentor to me. I think Spain always, it feels like he was a person with no self-doubt. And he believed in me, and he believed in me, and he believed in my aesthetic choices as an artist. And so he helped me grow as an artist and come to trust myself.
He definitely strikes me as someone who had a lot of raw energy, and I can see how that would be wonderful and also awful at the same time. Is that fair?
That's interesting. No, I don't ever think it was awful. I
Okay.
think, yeah, he had a lot of energy up until the end. He was someone that got old and never talked about being old. He was someone, well, we won't give away the end of the movie,
Right.
but and he of course was a political activist, but he and I always, we would just do get out the vote for every year for the elections. And I remember him being an old sick man. You know, it's going to make me cry and struggling up the steps, because San Francisco, of course, where we lived, is all steps and all hills,
Yeah.
and just struggling up the steps to people's houses to urge them to get out the vote, you know, as an old sick man. And that was just really amazing.
That's very impressive. And yes, it's very hilly in San Francisco. For people who haven't been there. So I'm a big fan of the documentary Crumb from the 1990s. And Spain is both in that project, and Robert Crumb is in this one. So could you tell me a little bit about that friendship, and what do you personally think about Robert Crumb's work?
Oh, well, first of all, let me just say I love Crumb
Yeah.
himself, the person. We still are very good friends, and I'm very good friends with Robert Crumb and Aileen Kaminsky Crumb, his wife.
Mhm.
And you know, in a lot of ways, Spain was, I would say, the emotional heart of the underground comics movement within that movement, because he was very close friends with Robert Crumb. He was very close friends with Robert Williams, who is most well known these days as a painter, um, and the founder of Juxtaposed magazine, a major art magazine on the West Coast. So he was everybody's best friend. And as Robert Crumb wrote very eloquently in the last issue of Zap Comics that came out after Spain died, with the death of Spain, Zap Comics died.
Hmm.
Spain was the person that emotionally kept Zap Comics going. And Robert wrote in the introduction that now that Spain is dead, that's it. Spain, it's the end of Zap Comics. So that's the role that Spain played in the relationship between Robert and Spain, and was very close. I find Robert Crumb's comics really fascinating, and I have a different view, I think, of some of his comics than some people. I think where Robert Crumb's comics become most controversial when he grapples with issues of race and issues of women. Some people see those as being satirical. I see those as just Robert is just bearing his soul. He's bearing his anxiety right there out on the page. You know, that's his anxiety. And it makes us really uncomfortable to look at,
Yeah.
because it exposes us. That's a lot of our stuff. I'm speaking as a white person here, you know? We got a lot of stuff out there. And on the one hand, I think we're being, in the anti-racist movement, which I think is really important, we're being told to look at it and admit our stuff. Well, Robert Crumb was doing that back in the 1960s. He was
Mhm.
looking at it and admitting it, and it isn't pretty, and it makes us all really uncomfortable. But I think that's the role of an artist.
Definitely. And let's talk a little generally, I guess. What role would you say the 1960s and 70s counterculture had on Spain's style?
I think, I mean, Spain was the 1960s counterculture.
Mhm.
And in some ways, just the way that we think of, like, you can think of certain songs that are the soundtrack for the 60s, and they're just the soundtrack for the
Yeah.
60s. I think in some ways, Spain's style is like the visual landscape, is part of the way we
Mm.
see the 60s. We're not even aware of it, that he was part of establishing a certain style of what the 60s look like to us. Um, he was a rebel early. You know, you look at, and one of the things that I was really excited to be able to do in the film was I tracked down some of the road vultures, the outlaw bikers he rode with in the very early 60s. We're talking 61, 63. And I tracked down even one of the Buffalo cops that tangled with the road vultures. And they're all in the film. Some of them have died since making the film. But Spain, you know, Spain was sort of an early, you know, anti-racist worker. He was really trying to change some of the attitudes of some of the guys that, you know,
Mhm.
maybe later on, their sons became some of the Proud Boys, but some of that, those people. So I was younger. I was more formed by the 60s, but not part of the 60s. But he was it. He was the real McCoy. He was the trash man, like his character, that created the 60s.
Okay. So what do you think Spain would have thought of contemporary political culture in America?
I was always asking him that.
Yeah.
He would have been, he and I were involved somewhat in the Occupy movement. He would have been, of course, he was very aware of police brutality and did a lot of work on that, and income inequality, and did a lot of work on that. So I think he would have continued to be involved. He would have been, one of his colleagues talks about the time that, he called Spain up, or Spain called him up, and they said the Nazis are going to march in San Francisco and let's go. And, Spain was like, yeah, let's go confront them and all that. And they went down there, and all these people came to confront the Nazis, and the Nazis didn't show up. And but Spain's friend said, yes, but I know it was because they knew Spain was coming.
Well, too bad he wasn't there in Charlottesville, right?
We might have had to go to Charlottesville, but he also softened, I have to say. Oh my God. He had said early in his life, if I'm dying, strap dynamite to me and take me to the local police station. I'll just blow it up. And I have to say that later in his life, when he became ill, I actually asked him, I said, well, I hope I don't have, we're not doing that, right? And no, he had come to see, of course, this is questionable now, he had come to hope that members of the police and the armed forces were merely working class people who, like his friends in the Road Vultures, if only he gave them the right comics to read, would realize that, we're all in this together.
Definitely. Working class solidarity. So do you enjoy documentary filmmaking, and what is the most satisfying part of the whole process?
Finishing.
Right.
The most satisfying part, because I have to tell you, documentary filmmakers sort of compete over how long it took them to make it. Oh, it took me 10 years to make this one. Well, this took 12 years. It's insane. It's like documentary filmmakers need a 12-step movement or something like that. It's like some sort of bizarre addiction to suffering.
Oh, God.
Sorry, it is. It takes so long. And unless you do scripted work, I've never done scripted work. I've always just gone in there and tried to find a story and try to create the story out of the material. But there's a lot of moments where you feel like it's never going to come together. This is just going to fail. No film here.
Right. God. So I guess it's satisfying but not enjoyable.
I've got to learn to lighten up, as many people have said. Yeah, there's a lot of enjoyable. The camaraderie on a film crew is really enjoyable.
Yeah. Tell me about the team behind this documentary then.
Yes, they're wonderful people in this documentary. And you may notice that both of the cinematographers that shot it, Naiti Gomez, who did a lot of the work on the East Coast, and Vicente Franco did a lot of work on the West Coast. They're both of Spanish origin. Vicente is from Spain. Naiti is from Cuba. And that was sort of like, Naiti started filming much later, but with Vicente, that, Spain named himself Spain. His given name is Manuel Rodriguez. He really identified with being Spanish. Those were the people that could get close to him. I picked camera people that Spain was going to like and get close to him. And they were both wonderful, each wonderful in their own way. And the sound people that came on those crews, wonderful too. As I've said, also very notable, the people Noel Honig, who created the animated title sequence, which I love, And what Noel did was he sort of pulled apart Spain's very dense work, which is just so hard to see because it's so dense, and made us able to see the different elements of it. Todd Goldstein was the title graphics designer. That was wonderful. Victoria Barrios Fender, another person. Victoria's from Argentina. Was the associate producer and finishing editor. The film could not have been made if she didn't keep believing in it and pulling it forward. There are 4 editors on the project: Elizabeth Finlayson, Jim Klein, Bill Weber, and Victoria Barrios Fender. Each brought a different point of view and enabled us to create this film, which is really, I think, in a reasonably short amount of time, it's 71 minutes, gives you all these different things, gives you a history of comics, gives you a family story, gives you a portrait of a man, gives you discussion of all these political issues.
Yeah, I liked how it wasn't like sheer glorification. Like there's critique as well, because I feel often with biopics or documentaries about people, you basically just like sum it up with one line: they were great.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that, because we really tried hard to do that. And in fact, one of the things we did at my brilliant editor, Elizabeth Finlayson's suggestion, is that when we really had to, wanted the feminist perspective, and when we interviewed Bitch Media founder Andy Zeisler, who got off some of the film's greatest lines about what she thinks of Zap Comics and what she thought of Spain's work, I didn't interview her. I had a different woman, Meg Lemke, a expert on comics, interview her so that I wouldn't bias the interview, so that she wouldn't have to say bad things. She wouldn't have to censor herself because here she is talking to his wife. So I wasn't even in the room.
Oh, that's interesting. What is your personal favorite comic book by Spain?
Oh, personal favorite comic book. Well, it's hard now because, as I said, I looked at just about every piece of his work, tens of thousands of pieces of work to really study it to make this film. I'm a big fan of Big Bitch, I have to say.
Okay.
Big Bitch, there's a great scene in the film we shouldn't give away, where we just know that Big Bitch is willing. Well, as Susie Bright, the sex writer, says what she loves about Big Bitch has no customer service personality. She just knows what she wants and she goes out and gets it. And, unfortunately, a lot of us women, even feminists, we still have that customer service personality.
Right. That's so true. Okay. Well, Susan, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate the conversation. Do you have a final word about the documentary you would like to end this interview with?
Just go out and see Bad Attitude, The Art of Spain Rodriguez. You'll have some fun. And we all need that right now.
We all do, most certainly. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.